following is a presentation of the St. Louis Chess Club. Players from 14 nations converge in St. Louis as USChessChamps.com presents the third annual Spring Chess Classic. Indeed, it is the third annual Spring Chess Classic. Welcome back to St. Louis in Studio B for Round 7 coverage. Hello, my name is Ben Simon, and I'm joined by Grandmaster Aman Hambleton. Aman, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great, Ben. I am excited to get another day of commentary with the one and only Ben Simon.
Thank you very much. I'll do my best to live up to your standard of expectations. Now, our expectations yesterday included dealing with a field of 6 players, tied for first in Group A. No longer, at least right now. Let's take a look at our standings in our Masters group, because yesterday we had all of the leaders playing each other, 3 big games, but only one of them ended decisively. It was Jeffrey Zhang over Liam Lee. And now because of that, going into today, Jeffrey Zhang is in clear first.
Yeah, no, Jeffrey is he's the new player to watch. He's right on top of the table. He broke free from that 6-player group in a very impressive victory. It seems actually that we can now say that Le Quang, I mean, he's having a reasonably bad tournament. He's taking some losses. Actually lost to Hansen, and he lost to Zhang here. So he's really going to have to recover, as you see Le Quang land right there in the middle of the table. And you know, you don't expect him to stay there very long, as he needs to make a big surge towards the top if he wants to finish well.
And it's definitely still possible. You know, 3 rounds to go. Yep. This thing is going until Sunday. So yep. Still time to turn the ship, still time to right it. Okay, our B group is a similar story. We have a clear leader, but he's been clear leader for a little bit longer. Bai Jinshi from China is now at 5 points. Still, he had a 1.5 lead at one point.
Yeah. But
now he's Boris Pulitz has shortened that to just 1. And actually, Boris Pulitz is already out of the tournament hall today with a draw.
Right. Yeah. So he's inching closer. He'll be at 4.5. And Bai Jinshi, again, he's still got some tough players left to play. But it's the chasing pack that's more interesting, because we have Boris Pulitz, who's making that surge. We have Sorokin, who's actually been on a tremendous run since that 0-2 start that we remember. So he and Alexander Mista are right behind. So I don't feel like Bai Jinshi thinks that the tournament's all wrapped up or anything. Like you mentioned, one loss, and all of a sudden he might not even be in first place anymore.
Indeed, more and more chess to play. And speaking of that, let's take a look at our schedule. Now, the games start every day at 1 p.m. Central Time. But we are on the air with you 2.5 hours later at 3:30 p.m. Central Time. We have 2 more days of play after today. We're going to finish it up in Sunday evening. Wednesday, March. Are those dates right?
10th.
I don't think those dates are right. Sunday, March 10th. Sunday, March 10th. I was right the first time.
You were right with Sunday.
Is going to be our final day. Has that been the whole time? Man, I feel like I'm being pranked here. Anyway, it shows how much I look at things in detail. 11 a.m. we are going to be starting early on Sunday, March 10th. And if there is a playoff necessary for first place, we're going to have it the same day at 5 p.m. That's why we're starting early. And also Sunday is daylight saving time. Right. So we're going to be jumping ahead anyway. So it's going to feel like 3 hours early.
That's going to, man, I am not looking forward to that.
No,
I'm not.
Now, we encourage you to join us online for this big event. USChessChamps.com is where you want to go to watch this. Have the YouTube chat open in a separate window and keep interacting with us, because USChessChamps.com, really cool experience. You're going to see the games happening on the digital board, and you'll be able to follow whatever you want. Doesn't necessarily have to be with us at the same time. I want to check in with our chat. They're pretty active already, as usual. No Life or Name says, yay, time for some chess. He has a really uplifting name, I have to say.
That's a good one.
Hello, Viola Player. Nice to see you again. And yay, it took so long by Jean-Paul Roman. Yeah, we are back, so thanks for joining us. Okay, so let's glance at our pairings in Group A. This is what's happening right now, just 2 floors up. Benjamin Bach versus Rustam Kazimjanov has already ended in a draw. The other 4 games are in progress. Aryan Tari versus Vasily Ivanchuk.
Tari and Ivanchuk also just drew.
Just now.
Just before the broadcast, yeah.
Ah, okay. Well, that game's over as well then. Thank you. Eric Hansen versus Ilya Nizhnik. Liam Lee versus Ray Robson. And our key matchup, hey, we have 2 favorites. They both feel like locals, but only one is, and the other is our leader. It's Varuzhin Akobian versus Jeffrey Zhang. So what's happening in this game so far, Aman?
Well, Jeffrey Zhang here, he's playing with the black pieces, and he's got a little bit of a cushion. Now, he doesn't need to win these games. I think he'll take his chances, but I don't think he's going all out. But it's funny, as I say that, I have to remember we're talking about Jeffrey Zhang, and I have the feeling that he almost just loves to play chess. He was playing Hansen in a previous round, and he declined what is a pretty known repetition, and I think played even a subpar move just to keep playing. So I get this feeling like he's always trying to play. A few moves ago, I got that same impression as, I mean, this position's kind of wrapping up, but he throws in that move E3. He wants to compromise the structure, and while this does look like it is heading towards a draw, Queen C5 has been played. I mean, he's just looking to create something. Maybe he's trying to use his time advantage. Maybe he's trying to use the exposed white king. But the players are still playing this position. We're on move 31. I don't think either player is too concerned about this. But long term, you have to be quite careful about this pawn running up the board. But I think it's about balanced by the fact that white's king is really exposed, and that can often be huge problems in a position like this. So if black finds time to sort of, let's say, an idea like rook here to maybe stop the queen trade, and if I just get that free time for an escape square, all of a sudden those 2 pieces can come down to the second rank and totally switch their attention. So might be some outside chances for either side here as white has that passed pawn, but the exposed king. But I think this is very equal here, and I wouldn't be surprised if Kobian and Zhang had a draw in this game right now.
In your opinion, stopping the queen trade is paramount at this point for Jeffrey, right?
Yeah, not so much in the sense that, if the queens are off, that we're losing or anything like that, but if he wants to play for anything, he's probably got to go here. If he plays a move like, I don't know, rook here, for example, then after queen c8, the queens are going to get traded, and I can't even take it. So I sort of have to play like queen f8. It's just not a very comfortable way to deal with things. And okay, maybe this pawn gets pushed, and there may be other moves. But let's just say an endgame like this, sometimes you have to be quite careful with this pawn, because if you spend time going over to take it, then maybe this king somehow reaches your kingside pawns first. So some sort of scenario like this. And although black actually wins the pawn, it's white's king who maybe gets in there, and you have to be quite careful here playing black, even though you're up a pawn. So these are just obviously some sort of far out nightmare scenarios that can happen. But
would that be a definite win for white in that situation, or could black draw that?
This one might be close, but probably, I mean, if white can take the pawns, it's definitely a win. The reason that it might be a draw, though, is if black can arrange to play f4, get rid of one pawn, and then often with the outside h-pawn, you can draw that position. So, but this would be Jeffrey, allowing absolutely everything wrong to happen. Mm-hmm. So that's why I think maybe just keeping the queens on is easier, and we can do that by bringing the rook all the way back to e8. But if the b pawn poses any problems, it's going to be something like this, where you get an outside pawn, try to use it as a decoy. But if white gets into any trouble, it's going to be a result of this king position on g1. So both players kind of have their things they're fighting for here, and this game will definitely continue a little bit, but I have to say it does look very even right now.
The players are no strangers to each other, especially in this setting. Jeffrey and Akobian have played 5 times before, at least in classical chess, probably more if you include Blitz and Rapid. But Jeffrey has never beaten Var. Var beat him twice, and then they had 3 draws, and they've all occurred here in St. Louis at either a U.S. Championship or one of the seasonal classics. The Classic Series started in 2017,
right.
And the U.S. Championships, I think the first year Jeffrey played was 16, and ever since then they've been unintentional rivals. But let's see if Jeffrey can get his first victory today, although it's looking kind of even.
Yeah.
Let's jump over to Group B. These are the games happening right now. 2 floors up and at uschesschamps.com. Now, unless I'm outdated again, there's only one game over right now in this field, and it's the one right there in the middle, Sorokin and Barish Politz. Saw them upstairs doing a post-mortem. That was a draw. But the game's in progress. Sergei Ehrenberg versus Hiedin Steingribsen. Nicholas Theodorou versus Gregory Kaidanov. Denis Kadrich versus Christian Kurilla. And our key matchup, these are becoming a little easy to pick. You gotta follow the leader, Alexander Mista versus Bai Jinshi. It's Poland versus China. Okay, let's see this game.
Yeah, this is not just the leaders game, but this is actually the 2 highest rated players in the B group. This is Alexander Mista at 25.92 and Bai Jinshi 25.93. So, but an ELO point between them. Although in the tournament there is a 1.5 points in the standings. Bai Jinshi currently sitting on 5 points and hasn't lost a game, and as I keep saying, hasn't looked uncomfortable. And that's just the biggest plus for a chess player. If you can get those consistent games where you might not win every game, but you're drawing effortlessly, I mean, that's the type of consistency. Your rating is always going to go up by winning and drawing, unless you're playing some really low-rated players. But generally, that's the recipe. Consistency is key, and Bai Jinshi is showing that in this tournament. Right here, we see him in a position. I want to back up a little bit because we can sort of show how we got here. The game started off as a Petrov, but what I want to focus on is right here was sort of interesting. When White played this move, bishop takes e5 with the idea queen a5. So right here, things are basically liquidating. It does look very equal. I'm sure the evaluation would suggest that. You can't often change that when you're dealing with a Petrov.
And you need to get rid of the knight on e5 to save the pawn on c4, right?
Right. You don't need to necessarily get rid of it, but you need to deal with c4. So getting rid of it is one of those ways. I could defend the pawn as well, but I don't really want to have double pawns in front of my king. So yeah, actually after knight e5, he decided, okay, I'm going to take with the bishop and then play this move queen a5 with the idea that this pawn right here is actually kind of difficult to defend. a6 might be played, but maybe I get the move c5 in. It's unclear. White's he's pressing in the middle, right? These pawns are dangerous. And what Bai Jinshi decided to do here I thought was very instructive and exactly the way you're supposed to treat these positions. He played the move bishop d6. And the idea, and this could be inverted as well. I mean, we could play b6 here as black, and then after they take the pawn, I could bring the bishop back. So similar idea, but getting the bishop out of the way first, and the idea being, okay, if I play c5, there's actually b6 here, and you don't take my bishop, so I'm taking your queen, and if you take here, well, then you just sort of got rid of your pawn for nothing, and there's nothing for you to take on a7. That was the whole point of this. So usually, you would go grab that pawn. That's exactly how the game went. Mista took the pawn on a7, and then you see this move b6. You might be wondering, what's happening here? Why is this so good? White just grabbed a pawn for free on a7, but if you look at the position, you'll see that all these pawns are completely stopped by black's bishop and pawns. A really nice outpost on c5 where that bishop can put a lot of pressure on the king. And if we look at this queen's position, the queen and bishop, together with this pawn on b6, actually take away all the queen's retreat squares. So it's not that easy for me to get back into the action. We've discussed a few games, especially yesterday, Ben, where the queen was so offside, and that actually cost 2 of the strongest players in the tournament their games.
Positions like this make me really nervous because it looks like, I know the queen is going to have a couple moves to get out of the corner, but can the queen be trapped here?
Right, probably not.
Okay.
Probably not trapped because you always have these footholds here that I could play queen here and there, or I could play queen here and there. So I can always get my queen out. We're not concerned about that. But again, just like we've seen before, it's not so much about trapping that queen, just about it being offside. It's just not near the action. And what black is doing is controlling the only open file and using his strong bishop against the knight, bishop c5 or bishop d6. It's really hard for white to make an escape square for the king because h3, that doesn't help at all. And g3, well, you might invite my queen in. So it's really hard for white to free the king, to deal with the open file, strong bishop, and we got that queen way out of play. So it continued, queen a6. I mean, he's got to get out of there. Bishop c5, taking control of that nice diagonal. And, I mean, white just has to trade the rook. Why? I mean, rook e2 is such a huge threat. Hitting this pawn, once the queen joins the action, we see that black's basically on a power play here. 3 on 2, that queen on a6 is not helping. Rook e1, and now black makes an escape square so that there's no checkmate for him to worry about. And once this happens, I think black is really in the driver's seat. Again, we have to stop this move, queen e2. But look at that queen. It can't jump back here or here, nowhere. Can't get back to help. So white's got to use his king. Stop queen e2, but we see the queen finally invade. Now, in doing so, it does give up control of this square, but you'll see with a forced series of checks, he actually takes the pawn. So now the pawns are back to even, but we have that innate advantage here for Bai Jinshi. The queen on a4 finally rejoins the action on e2, but basically you see 2 pawns here holding back 3, and the potential for a pass pawn later in the endgame here for black, as well as, what is this guy doing on d3? So white has a lot to prove in this position. We just saw the move knight d4, h5, knight b3 on the board. This is the current position here, as once again I have to say Bai Jinshi is for choice. This started off as just a Petrov. You can tell he's not out here trying to behead people. He's playing very, very reasonable, controlled chess. And when his opponents give him chances or they invite complications, I mean, he's ready for them. And he's always shown that he can handle those types of complications, calculations, whatever it may be. He's up on the clock. We've never seen him in time pressure this tournament. And right now, he's sitting in what I would call a very comfortable position. I think good chances to win this game, as we've seen him win games from positions that were a lot more equal than this.
Yeah, Bai Junqi, I don't know if that we've talked about it too much. He's only 19 years old, and he won last year's North American Open, which is a big tournament. I mean, if you get U.S. Chess's Chess Life in the mail, you'll see advertisements for the North American Open all the time.
Right.
So Bai Junqi, maybe a name that we'll have to remember around here a little bit more.
Yeah, he's definitely picking up some elo from this tournament if it continues to go this way, which I believe will probably shoot him over 2,600. Don't know if he's been there before, but I'm sure he has.
Let's glance at what the players are competing for in this event. There's a $22,000 prize fund in Group A, and the winners walk away with $6,000, $4,000, $3,000, and it goes on down. No one is going home empty-handed, but more is better. Group B, $14,000 prize fund, and the champion leaves with $4,000. Okay, so now that we've got our introductions out of the way, let's look at the rest of the games. Anything in Group A catch your eye? Eric Hansen's game, perhaps?
Yeah, we can look at Hansen's game. Eric is playing Ilya Nizhnik in the A group, and this game does look like we might see something happen. Now, it might not look that bad. It might actually look like maybe it's pretty even, especially on material, but I think it's important to note a few things about the position. Number one, the time situation. We see that classic 30-minute time advantage, and it's going to be in Nizhnik's favor here. 10 moves to make, so definitely not unreasonable to think that Hansen will be just fine handling this time pressure. But I think it's important to note, just on the subject of time pressure, that players often have this idea that, like, oh, for example, Grishuk, Alexander Grishuk, it's like, oh, he's better in time pressure. You know, he's so good when the clock is low. He should just wait until the clock gets down there and play the whole game like that.
I feel like there's some science against that.
Right, and logically, you know, there's a lot of players who are extremely good in time pressure, but there's no one in the world who could say that they're better in time pressure than not in time pressure. They might be better than their opponent, and then you might see a gap when it gets to time pressure, but every chess player is going to prefer having time on the clock, you know, think about everything, calculate everything. So mistakes will happen in time pressure. And yeah, Eric's in a tough position here where it looks like black's position is just so easy to play. It's dead even on material, but I think that Nizhnik has a noticeable advantage here. Strong knight on d5, way more active king. The thing is, black can activate his king pretty easily. White, on the other hand, really has to work to get this king out. And also, once you get in the middle of the board, it might not be safe there, even some checks. But black's is really, really well placed. The bishop isn't doing anything for the moment, but if we update the board, we see the last couple moves there. Knight e3, f5, and it's clear that that bishop can join on one of two very useful diagonals, either hitting that pawn in the center of the board or bishop h6, pressuring those two knights and kind of undermining white's position. So I think that Hansen is at risk of losing this game pretty seriously, just based on how easy it is for Black to play and whether or not he can find accurate moves up until time control. Now, if he hits time control, I think it might be a totally different story altogether, as the position is probably not that bad, but he needs to simplify. He needs to simplify pieces, and it is not an easy task here. Now, I might be overstating things a little bit, but I really do prefer Black's position, and we'll see if he can hold this, because Nizhnik, more than 30 minutes on the clock, and he has those moves that are just kind of obvious to play. Just has a few moves in his position that he might play rather quickly. So,
what would you do if you were him?
As Nizhnik? So A4 has just been played, so it's Ilya's turn.
Oh.
I think the first couple things to note. A5
I was talking
is an
about
idea.
Hansen, but would you like A4?
I like A4. A5 is an idea, probably not one I necessarily want to do, but the reason that I like A4 is because if I ever put a knight on C4, I can't really be kicked out anymore. So I might put a knight there and then threaten the idea of knight takes knight, and then this pawn on B6 starts to hang. So this is one idea. We might see the bishop come to D8, maybe even just to deal with that momentarily. We might see the exchange of knights, followed by Black putting his king on D5. But I like the move A4. It definitely seems correct here. So Eric's going to be looking for forced ways to trade things, right? Like he's looking at stuff like knight C4 and any sort of forced calculation where I get liquidation. He wants to get those. If he could trade the A pawn for the B pawn for Eric, that would be great. And vice versa for Nizhnik, he wants to leave pawns, leave pieces on the board if he can, try to create more areas, more space for Eric to blunder here as a result of time pressure.
It's worth noting that last night, while it wasn't on the official tournament schedule, there was a big gala in St. Louis, closer to the river, but still in St. Louis City.
Right.
And I don't know how many players in the field were there, but I know you were there, and I know Eric Hansen was there, and there was some blitz simul's going on.
Yeah, well, I actually wasn't aware of this event, but what Ben's referring to is there was a gala last night.
Oh, so you didn't go?
Oh, no, there was a gala. I'm just not aware of the gala that was happening, but there was a gala last night, and it was a really fun event. It was a fundraiser, and I thought it was great. It was one of the first ones that I went to since I've been here. And Eric Hansen, among a lot of other participants, including Fabiano Caruana, was also at the event, and they had the kids on the stage, and I think Hansen and a few other GMs, Fabiano included, did like a 5-board simul with clocks. So they were jumping around. They had to make sure not to lose on time. Eric won all 5 of his games. I think Fabiano may or may not have suffered some losses.
What?
I don't know.
Man, that's
you had to be there. You had to be there.
Well, it was a fundraiser for Ascension Health's Your Move Chess, which is putting Scholastic Chess, this program specifically in the Ferguson Florissant District, which is very near and dear to the chess club's heart. So, there's chess all over the St. Louis area, but this was specifically for them, to serve them well. And I know that Nick Ragone, pardon me, Nick Ragone is heading up the program as part of Ascension. He's been on these shows many times. If you look back on our YouTube channel, you'll see plenty of pieces with him. And actually, he's a big chess player too. So I know he
is, and he legitimately he is really into chess, and I could tell when I met him, he was thrilled to just have everyone there, and I don't think he could say it enough over the night. He was just thanking everyone, so you could tell he's really passionate. Yeah,
good stuff. Okay, Group B. Let's go to Sergei Ehrenberg's game against Steingrimson. USA, a former U.S. championship competitor against Iceland. We're seeing Steingrimson here in St. Louis for the first time.
Right. And what is going on here? This one, you can tell already, just from the amount of pieces on the board, is a much different game than some of the ones we've taken a look at. We are nowhere close to the end game here, and the pieces are going to be flying. I want to jump back into the middle game and just see how we got here, but it seems like Ehrenberg produces games that usually end in results. He's been playing some, in my opinion, some very eccentric, very fun chess.
I just want to tell you, late breaking, just now, Theodoro and Kaidanov have drawn their game. Okay, so let's take a look at this one.
So Ehrenberg is, it looks like they had an option to repeat here. That was what took a few moves in the middle of the game. So king h8 was played by Steingrimsson, and after bishop b3, bishop e6, we had repetition, and then Ehrenberg decided, I'm going to play on. Maybe that was for a number of reasons. Maybe he just enjoyed his position. Maybe he likes to play chess. I can't disagree with that. Sort of the same mentality as Jeffrey, you know? Just why take the repetition when there are other ways to sort of maintain the flexible position? And bishop c4 was chosen. Seems like a very good one. a6 is being targeted. Maybe the reason that he didn't want to go for it or was hesitant at first with the repetition was maybe the continuation that we saw in the game. Knight f4 played, and hey, you're going to get that pawn on a6, but in exchange, you get to take that pawn on d3. So we saw the d3 pawn being exchanged for the pawn on a6. If white ever has to play a move like this, this is basically something you would always say is in favor of black because of the light squares. This bishop is not very strong, and this guy right here reigns supreme on all these weak light squares, and white's position really falls apart without that light square bishop or the d3 pawn. So he decides to go tactical and play this move bishop g5 with the idea like, okay, you're going to take one of my bishops, but I'd rather it be the dark squared one. I said that wasn't the better bishop, so he's going to give it up voluntarily and try to take that knight back with the light squared bishop. So bishop g5 played, takes, bishop e7 defending this pawn on g5, which is all of a sudden kind of thrown out there from h6 by force, and now it's kind of a target for white here. So I think we've just had one more move on the board. Yes, a knight g3. Knight g3 played, and with 15 minutes ticking down, Ehrenberg's just under 20. This one is absolutely going to be some fireworks here. White has ideas like queen e2, with the idea queen e4 hitting the knight, threatening checkmate in 1. Also, queen e2 has the idea of bringing the rook over to d1, which would be great. Makes that queen very uncomfortable sitting on d8. And on top of all of this, the other pluses for white, this pawn keeps the knight completely out. And this guy, let's not forget, that is a passed pawn. And I mean, if I'm not going to make a queen, at the very least, it's going to be one of those decoy pawns where I can push it up the board. There'll be threats that you always have to consider about a7 hitting the rook, a8, you got to leave a whole piece just to watch that pawn, make sure it doesn't queen. And maybe that gives the upper hand to white on the king side. So offhand, I have to say it looks like Ehrenberg has achieved something here over the last couple moves. We see some weak light squares here in black's camp, although very solid, and the move g6 can always come into play, you know, so you don't get mated on this diagonal, or queen coming to h5, right? That's always something to be scary about. In this position, if I make a random move here, I get real scared of what about this move? Knight takes e5, and if knight takes, for example, just checkmate, h7 and h8. So we already have to watch out for tactical ideas like this, and no doubt Ehrenberg just played the move knight e4 to clear the way for this dangerous bishop to open up. I think Steingrimsson has a lot to worry about in this position. As I mentioned, you got way over on one side of the board the a-pawn, and then way over on the other you got checkmate to worry about. So I like white's position here, and it seems as Ehrenberg has just got up from the board confidently, maybe he does as well.
And I think in the hustle and bustle of our opening with the schedule, I neglected to mention what these players are actually playing under as far as time controls. If you look at the clocks, you'll notice with every move they get a 30-second bonus added on.
Right.
We're looking at, so we have the A and the B round robin fields, 2 10-player round robins. The time control, 90 minutes for the first 40 moves. After they hit the 40th move, they get 30 minutes added on to each clock for the remainder of the game. There's a 30-second increment for move number 1, and also there's a 30-move draw rule in effect. We're not going to see any draws accepted before the 30th move. The only exception is if there's a threefold repetition. Well, okay, then it's forced.
And there actually was one in one of the games that finished earlier. That's why it could finish before move 30, as it was, in fact, a repetition between Sorokin and Barsh-Politz.
We might have get to glance at that a little bit later on, but right now I think the most newsworthy event in Group A, our key matchup, it's over. It's a draw. Akobian and Zhang have drawn their game. Can we see how it happened, Aman?
Absolutely, yeah. No, always we were paying attention to the key matchup in Group A between Jeffrey Zhang, who's the leader, and it looks like things sort of panned out as expected here. Queen e8 was actually the choice of Jeffrey, and basically this b pawn started rolling up the board, and what you get when the b pawn rolls up the board is black pretty much he's compelled to do something. He has to react on the king side, make some threats. If he doesn't, that pawn is actually going to get really scary. So in the end, he decided, let's just trade off these rooks, and this is more or less a forced repetition.
All right. Well, Jeffrey found a way out of that one. And there's another game that's actually kind of similar to this one in Group A is Liam Lee versus Ray Robson.
Right.
Same material on the board. It's not over yet, but it looks... is this very similar? Is this going to be a draw here?
This does look very similar. The pawn structure especially. We have these 2 pawns here for white, and then the 3 for black, just like the last game. You go into games like this, and the only way that someone could win is probably with that A pawn. You could also overpush with white, push that A pawn down too far. You know, all of a sudden maybe you lose your kingside pawns. But we're speaking about pretty serious hypotheticals here because this is going to be a draw. I think it's in this position. It's actually Ray's move, and there's a few ways to. I mean. The normal idea is okay, I play rook here, and your pawn is going nowhere. So in order to free that pawn up, you have to play your king down to b1 to guard the pawn, and then suddenly your rook is free. So it's like a 2-3 step process to even move the pawn. But once you do that, then your king and rook are right next to the pawn, and you can sort of move your rook up, move your king up, move the pawn, and slowly inch forward like that. But in the meantime, let's not forget how many moves white has to expend just to accomplish that. Black is no doubt going to be pushing some pawns over here and getting that king up into the action. So these games are, I mean, this is just completely equal. But
you think they'll play it out?
I think they'll play out a little bit. You probably want to see sort of what your opponent's intending, because black might not even play rook a3, right? You want to see how the players evaluate. You might think as white, if my opponent doesn't play rook a3, maybe he was a little afraid of this plan and how quickly my pawn gets going, and vice versa with black. So I think the players are probably just going to demonstrate a little bit their understanding and put those pieces on the right squares. But if the players play as I expect, I don't see anything. It would be crazy to have a result other than a draw in this game. So I do expect Lequang and Ray Robson to draw from this position here, as most rook endgames are drawn, and this one especially, that pawn on a2 is not even going yet. So I believe this one is probably going to end in a draw.
Well, this is a really important game for the standings. We've got number 1 seed versus number 3 seed right here.
Yes.
Also, because of the Webster University connection, these guys are no strangers to each other. Actually, Liam Lee has never defeated Ray Robson in a similar situation to what we looked at in a Kobian's game. Robson has 2 victories over Liam Lee, and they've drawn 3 times. And this has occurred between 2011 and 2016. So they haven't played in a substantial amount of time because, well, when somebody leaves Webster, you're not in the clique anymore. You're not going to be as close.
Lequang Liam has left the chat.
Right.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, we expect this to be their lifetime draw number 4. And how about Dennis Kadrich versus Christian Karilla in Group B?
Yeah, I think that's most of the action for Group A, because we had that draw in our critical matchup. And then Lequang's position looks equal, and Hansen is still struggling. So most of the action, which has been the case actually, again, is in Group B, it seems. So let's take a look at that position of Karilla. And Karilla has also been playing some games that have been very attacking, always back and forth. And once again, we find Karilla in a position where both sides are going for the throat, it looks like.
There's some holes in those castle walls.
There are, especially right here and right here. There's something missing. This was I believe it was a dragon. So no surprise that the game got so crazy from that from that position. So let's back up just a little bit, because we want to see how those holes developed. This was the opening. I think this was the point here, e5. This move e5 by Kadrich was an inspired idea to temporarily sacrifice a pawn and play g5. And the idea is to put this knight at a commission. He wants to say, okay, that knight goes back there, I centralize my knight and sort of dominate the board positionally. So sometimes when you're attacking, you have to put your foot on the brake a little bit and not necessarily just go for the king all the time, but it's nice to see a little mix of positional and tactical approach here. Knight e8, knight e4, and Kirilla says, okay, you gave me a pawn, I'll give it right back because I want the activity as well for my rooks, for my bishops. And after long castle, such an interesting position, there are two pieces hanging now as a result of castling. It's almost like a tactic. It's like, how do you make a double attack here?
Right.
You castle, right? And your king's hitting the rook, and your rook helps hit that bishop on d7. Now,
well, is there a way to trap that rook on b2?
Well,
bishop
you
b3
could have played maybe bishop b3 here, right? And that would be more of a trap. First of all, if you want to take that rook, you're going to have to work hard because this bishop can always be opened up to defend it. And apart from that, a move like c4 can always free the rook as well, whether it's taking on c2 or taking bishop takes c4, rook takes c2, for example, is already way off course for white because you just can't keep that rook bottled up in there. If we could, then a move like bishop b3 is actually exactly what we want to do. But castles was played, and here he didn't even have to necessarily defend. He plays the move e4, and he says, okay, if you play queen takes bishop here, it's very likely that a move like queen a5, getting the queen in here, maybe threatening some really interesting checkmate ideas. For example, queen takes, queen a5. Now let me just say that white plays a bad move, plays pawn takes. There would already be some checkmating ideas like rook takes, king takes, queen c3 check, that's supported by the bishop, forced to go here, and queen b2 is already made. So there are some ideas there for Kirilla, and that's why Kadrich here played the move bishop takes c5 because he realized once again he has to combine attack with defense. He can't just take that bishop and run away with a full piece. That's not how these crazy positions work. Bishop takes c5, queen a5, and what was the point of bishop takes c5? He wants to deal with this move by playing bishop d4, and just at all costs, he had to get rid of this guy. Bishop on g7 was the strongest piece on the board, so he's going for a bishop exchange, and he does achieve that. Drops the bishop to b3, and you get the feeling that the way the game is developed here, and we'll just show the updated board, as Kirilla is a little bit low on time, so that the moves are coming in fast. Rook d2 was the last move played. If we do a body count here, one extra pawn for Kadrich on the c-file, and you also have this pressure here of black never wanting to play bishop takes b3, because if you play that move, you kind of fix white's pawns. You say, okay, you take with your a pawn, all of a sudden those two pawns connect, much stronger that way, gives better shelter for the king. Queen b7 was just played by Kirilla. He has the idea to play a5, a4. I think this position is definitely better for white. He's up that one pawn, and he has defensive ideas like rook over to c3, maybe move my king eventually and try to trade some pieces. And I've got good control of black's king position, so there are some back rank mating ideas later down the line. I think that Kadrich, with a more than 10-minute time advantage here, somehow seems to have got out of those complications in good shape. And I think that he has very good chances to convert that one extra pawn into a win.
I think both of these players at this point, are out of contention for first prize.
Right.
How do you? I don't know how many closed round robins you've played.
Well, I've played a few in St. Louis, that's for sure.
Okay. Well, in that case, whenever you are in a situation like this where you're out of contention for first, is it hard to find motivation for games down the stretch?
Well, the answer is easier probably for me than other players because, I never win tournaments, Ben, so I go in with very low expectations and I meet them every time. But obviously, if you're striving, as everyone obviously should, to win first place or to claim a big prize in a tournament, and everyone's going home with something in these tournaments, but somebody's going home with something more than someone else, and there's some pretty big prizes to be won. One place in the standings can be as much as $1,000. So these guys are definitely fighting for that, and when you know you're out of contention for first place, it definitely hurts a little bit, but I think it's almost more invigorating to play spoiler. At least that's the opinion that I take. You feel like you have nothing to lose. Maybe your chess actually improves because you trust your instincts more and you just go for it, and maybe you've been a little too tense the whole tournament. So sometimes that can actually be very liberating and kind of a nice feeling to just play chess without worrying about where you're going to place because you feel like it's already far gone. So maybe that's how these guys approach it. I think everyone's a little bit different as a competitor, but that's one way to look at it. Which playing spoiler is always fun. You don't want to be the guy who's just getting picked on by everyone. So that starts happening too much. You just start loosening up and say, all right, if you guys are going to come for me, let's at least play some fun games. I mean, Kirilla has been playing some crazy interesting positions. Ehrenberg as well, and these are examples of guys who have taken some losses, but can easily rebound. It's just like live by the sword, die by the sword type of strategy.
Right. Yeah, it differs for everybody. Aman, it looks like they're repeating over in Group B's Alexander Mista versus Baijin Shi. Let's take a glance at that. We might be seeing the end of this. Yep, the game has just ended, and it is a draw.
That's surprising.
Yeah.
I'm surprised by that. I don't necessarily
Did
agree.
Bai miss something?
I mean, miss is a strong word because I don't think it's like there was something sitting there that he just didn't see. But rather, I think that the position is just good for black. I would be confident here playing this on. But the other way to look at it is that as Baijin Shi, I mean, you're just making some of the most comfortable draws of your life. I mean, he's never in danger, and he's saying, all right, it's another day's work right there. I'm playing with the black pieces against, a super strong grandmaster, the second seed in the tournament, the B group. And he walks away very unscathed. So he may be looking at it from a tournament perspective at this point, Ben, just securing that draw, putting him one step closer to just converting the tournament victory overall. But I can't say that objectively I agree too much with it. White's putting all his pawns on light squares, and he's having that queen defend all the weak points, right? C4, A2, G2, and everything else is protected. And he's saying, okay, like, your turn. What are you going to do? So that's White's defensive idea, and no doubt White is very solid here. And I don't mean to say that Black is winning or anything, but I do feel like Black is clearly better here, and maybe in a different tournament situation, on a different day, maybe a different opponent, you might see Black play on. So I'm a little bit surprised with the result, but you really can't delve into the mind of a guy who's clearly in first place in the tournament too much because he probably has his own reasons.
Do you take anything away from Baijin Shi? Like, oh, he's not fighting hard enough to get that extra half point?
Not at all. No. Chess players got to get paid. Got to get that shmoney, Ben.
All right. We have 4 games total going on. So far, everything's a draw. Sergei Ehrenberg versus Heiden Steingrimsen. USA versus Iceland. Let's see if anything has changed in this Group B game.
Right. This one looked like it was probably going to be decisive, is what I was saying the last time I looked at this. And sort of developing as I expected, that A pawn is going to be dangerous because even if I lose the pawn, remember, that's like part of the danger of the pawn. It's just being there, just existing. And it's going to force this knight to, let's say, take, and all of a sudden that queen is tied to the knight. And that enables all sorts of tactics on the king side, actually, because the queen and knight are actually both tethered to the queen side. You never know what that might change tactically way on the other side of the board. We still have this idea of getting the queen out, but the way that Steingrimsen is dealing with this is he's saying, okay, listen, you can have queen h5 check. You can have queen h7 check. You know what? I'll sweeten the deal. You can have queen h8 check. But then the king's going to e7 after running away, and there's nothing after that.
And your queen's just looking like a fool in the corner.
Exactly. So that's what he's trying to say. But, of course, the best part about this is White doesn't have to go and do all that. He can save those checks for maybe once he controls this square. So maybe he plays some other moves. I mean, a6 looks extremely logical. I believe it's... Whose turn is it here? Queen d5. So it's actually White to play. I mean, a6 looks like it makes a lot of sense. Bishop e4 is probably a very good move here as well. Maybe some knight move to threaten, just renew this idea of queen h5. But to me, a6 is easily the first move that I consider. Just put that pawn out of harm's way. Keep tickling the idea of playing a7. And remember, a combination of a6 and bishop e4 may actually be really deadly as that pawn sneaks to a7 and bishop controls a8. We could actually maybe just win some material tactically pretty soon. So I think Ehrenberg is actually doing fantastic in this position. I think he's got a big advantage.
Would you consider for Ehrenberg playing a move like knight e4, attacking the g5 pawn?
Would I consider knight e4? Absolutely. because I would consider a lot of moves that I'm probably not going to play. The knight just came from e4. That would be my main argument with not playing it. If knight e4, I feel like I take that square from my queen. I feel like I take it from my bishop. And I think that the queen there has a very serious potential. I also think that having the bishop there has serious potential for the a-pawn. So for those two reasons, it's not like I would play queen e4 or bishop e4 maybe right away, but I want to have that square vacant. It's sort of a great pivot point for either the knight or the bishop or the queen to use at some point. But it's almost more powerful that no piece is sitting there than to have one there and taking the square away from someone else. So I like the move knight g3, which is sort of a clearance. And he's not threatening anything, but he might be threatening something later, as all these pieces can jump into these business squares and potentially do some damage to black's position. And you never know which one is going to jump, so you always have to be calculating and ready for all three of them.
And Sergey, it looks like he just made another move. Let's see what it was.
He just played Ben Simon's move, knight e4.
Okay, so he wants the pawn, right? Wants the pawn?
That's a thumbs down for me. Ben, do you want to explain this move?
I like to take the g5 pawn. That's what I want to play it for.
Can you elaborate on that?
So you've got two knights, and they're bullying up on the g5 pawn. And if I take a pawn with my knight, if the bishop takes back, then I can take it back with the other knight.
Okay.
Foolproof, right?
Okay, I understand. Okay, so I'm actually receiving a lesson. I actually received another lesson earlier today when I was doing a kids class. I learned that double pawns are called stacked pawns. I didn't know that. I didn't know that was a term.
I've never heard that either.
Ben, that's the second thing you've learned today. Double pawns, stacked pawns, and knight e4 is actually a brilliant move, which was probably misevaluated by me. So now we have to understand, what does he want to do with knight e4? As Ben Simon, head analyst, said, the g5 pawn is being targeted here.
I'm still waiting for you to completely tear me a new one with this, by the way.
Oh, I'm only just getting started. Well, it's hard for me to elaborate on the move because the extent of my knowledge here is really what you just said there, is that we want to take this pawn on g5. Now, that's very clear. However, in the previous position, let's back up to when that knight was on e4, how was black dealing with this pawn being hanging? That queen on d8 was watching over. So it's definitely an idea, and it's not insane to think that black may play queen d8. Now, what's going to happen after queen d8? White has a few new options compared to the previous position. This bishop used to be there. So it was controlling knight c5. Now knight c5 is an option by white. Also, rook d1 is an option, hitting that queen. But I think, for example, something like this, once you put your queen here, you're kind of out of harm's way, and you are defending that pawn. Let's not forget that if you defend that pawn like this, queen e3 is another way to just say, I'm taking this pawn no matter what. Add an extra piece in there. Hit that g5 pawn. To me, it looks like in this position, there are a lot of winning moves. Maybe not winning on the spot, but I think that white is kind of spoiled for choice. Knight e4, going after that pawn, maybe not the one I would go for, as bishop e4 did seem strong. But you also have to keep in mind that Ehrenberg is, he has very good instincts here, and it looks like he's trusting them. He's going with knight e4. He's saying, well, this one looks good to me. I'm probably going to get a pawn for it. And he knows that the resulting position is probably going to be winning. How does black deal with this? The first move I would really give consideration to as well, other than queen d8, is, you at least have to think about, what if I go g4? Because g4 is a way to actually get rid of your pawn altogether. Yeah. So if g4 happens, then Ehrenberg, I think I think he's got to think about knight g5 here. Pawn takes, bishop takes. We can take here. But I'm not sure about this position, as this pin is a little bit annoying, and maybe that rook gets over to g8. So unless this one works with queen e3 and getting h6, I always have king g7. So I'm not a big fan of this one. He's played the move g4, so I wonder if we're going to see knight g5 or h takes g4. It's now white to play. I think knight g5 is the other one that I was suggesting. If I get to take this bishop, the light squares are going to be really, really uncomfortable here for black. Bishop c4, this pawn hanging, queen h5 if that pawn moves. So the idea is if you take here, I've got a queen h5 in the position, I've got a knight takes f6, all sorts of tactics here. I'm sure something is going to work for white. So g4 has been played, but I imagine that this was very expected by Ehrenberg, so he's not going to be surprised by this move. In fact, it's very likely that he has a retort ready. You can see him there on the camera. 10 minutes for Ehrenberg, under 5 minutes for Steingrimsson, and he's still got 8 moves to make. I haven't really seen Steingrimsson under time pressure. I can't really say, whether he's quite comfortable there or not, but this doesn't look like the position you want to play very quickly with black. I think it's very, very easy to miss tactics, especially around your king with that A-pawn, and probably, I think it's just completely winning for white.
Let's go over back to Group A. It may not be much to look at with the 2 games left, but Eric Hansen versus Ilya Nizhnik. It'd be good just to stay on top of these, just to make sure we don't miss any explosions.
Absolutely. I see 41 seconds. That means, that tells a story right there. You don't even have to look at the board. 41 seconds. Hansen is clearly uncomfortable here. So we did actually see this maneuver. Bishop e7 and bishop d8. Now, I mentioned this earlier, Ben, but why was I really suggesting it is because it's so annoying when you're low on time if you can't simplify the position. If you can't liquidate, then it's one of the most uncomfortable things. You're sitting there wishing that, I would just take this pawn for this pawn, you get this, I get that. The position becomes a lot more simple to play. But if your opponent keeps pawns and pieces on the board, it becomes so difficult to navigate the complications as their time ticks down. So this is a really good move because I thought after a5 we would see what happened in the game, b5. And he just keeps pieces on the, it just makes it more complicated. It's very difficult to face. After a6, utilizing that pin there, black forces white's hand. It says f4. It would be crazy to think you can have both your knights attack and not do anything. So he has to budge. Takes. There's no knight e3 check. But instead, Eric comes up with the move knight a3. And in this position, Ilya is thinking about what to do, but he would love to keep material on the board. He has to be careful of this a-pawn, though. For example, let's say the move b4 happens. Not only could I play a7, but also the move knight c2, and if king c4, hitting the rook, we do have this idea of rook takes b4, takes, knight takes, and if you grab my knight, I will play a7 and get a brand new queen, which you can't stop because that bishop is the wrong color. So there are a few options here, but Nizhnik is going to look to find the most complicated option he can, where he probably keeps as many pieces on the board. And we have to remember, in an endgame, black's king is so much better placed than white's. So if these 2 pawns here get traded off for one another, the king can at least capture that pawn on d4. And I think that black is going to be in an endgame here that he can push. So Nizhnik, with that huge time advantage and the calculations here, he's probably going to find something pretty tricky. However, Hansen is he's doing a good job struggling. The only way that I see he has chances is he just has to liquidate. We got to see pawns starting to disappear. Maybe even trade the rooks, but lose a pawn and just somehow hold an endgame where you've got that knight and you're going to put all your pawns on light squares and say, okay, what can this bishop do? Much like the Bai Jinshi against Alexander Mista game. So maybe that's an idea to just sort of bail out at this point. Hansen needs a lifeline as he's got 3 to 4 moves to make before time control, and we need to see some liquidation, otherwise Nizhnik is probably going to claim this point.
And speaking of claiming points, over in Group B, we got to take a look at Denis Kadrich versus Kristin Kirilla. It looks like Kirilla has just made a severe miscalculation, and Kadrich may be on top of it. It looked like queen takes b3. Hey, I get a free pawn because the c pawn is pinned, but there's a hole in Kirilla's game, and it might lead to a mate. Look at that.
Queen f8 played.
Threatening h6, right?
It's actually funny. We had the Montreal Chess Bros played a Pro Chess League match, and one of our opponents, we won the match, maybe because of this, but one of our opponents missed that the move Queen h6 was possible. And it's actually a very visual oversight. It's quite possible to miss this. I'll be honest with you, Ben. I didn't actually notice Queen h6 was a threat.
I had to look at it for quite a while over here. I was like, why is this
When we jumped to the position, I thought that white was trying to bring the rook down, but of course we're getting mated there. The queen is also doing a good job defending that pawn all the way from b3. So I was actually looking at a position, I was like, I don't even see what's going on, but you'll often see there's like that one blind spot, even for a grandmaster, strong as Kirilla, we've seen crazier blind spots by even like the world champion, and everyone has that, you know, mate in one that they just don't see or something. Here, queen h6 is kind of that move. That's a check, followed by mate on d8, and it comes with checks. So it means that I can't play a move like queen here. That would keep an eye on my pawn. It keeps an eye on checkmate here. It even threatens checkmate in one, but it's no good against just queen h6 and mate on the board with check. So I think in this position, the problem is that queen h6 can't be stopped. So what do you have to get ready for? After king g8, you need to stop that move. And how do you stop that move? That's the issue. So if we look at moves that deal with rook d8, I mean, these moves are out of the question. Queen b6 comes to mind, but then you've got another hole in your position, which is this pawn. And your queen had to be defending that. So it doesn't appear that there's any way to defend all the weak points in the position. If I play queen b6, something like queen takes f7, here, there's no checkmate here, but I will be able to go queen e8 and rook d7 mate. So, Ben, I think this is just force mate. I think this is just force mate on the board. The worst part for Kirilla, he doesn't even have move 40 to think about this. This just looks like a massive oversight, and I wouldn't be surprised if he quotes the queen h6 square as just, I didn't see it. I wouldn't be surprised, and you know, it might look like a horrible one-move blunder, and to be fair, it is, but honestly, I think that just counts as a blind spot for the Grandmaster here.
Well, I encountered the blind spot myself. I mean, I'm not a Grandmaster or anything, but I was like, well, there's no problem.
Right.
Queen goes up to d8, and hey, f6 is covered by the rook.
Right.
So you can't checkmate from the outside in, but it's almost like from the inside out.
Yeah, no, this is weird, and it all comes with checks. So I think we will actually see, I mean, Kirilla's there, and he is just really hating himself right now. He's in his own head. He knows he just missed this idea, queen h6, and all that was forced. So as soon as he took that pawn on b3 and went into this line, he was sort of pot committed, all in. I mean, he just has to see how it plays out, and then in the end, you find you miss one move. You're not going to recover from that because there's checkmate being threatened, and with less than 3 minutes, I think he knows he's going down here, and there's just no way out. There's no way to cover this and d8 with the one queen, and the rook has to stay pinning the pawn, so just nothing works for black here. So he may throw in the towel very soon, and it looks like Denis Kadrich is going to get another point on the board.
Very nice. If we go back for just a moment, the queen taking b3, what was Christian's position looking like before this mistake?
Well, I think it's important also to maybe go back to this bishop takes bishop, because he was probably planning that move as a result of this whole calculation. So it's unclear whether he would have gone for that if he had seen this. Now, that being said, Denis did exactly what I was saying, which is get the king off the b file, bring that rook over, and then I didn't really calculate, but I knew that there was going to be something here. The king is wide open for black, and you do have back rank issues, and that bishop is being kicked away. Rook takes c4 is just a threat. And it's not very easy for me to move my bishop. If I go here, I mean, it's just crazy to leave this pawn attack. That bishop's good. What am I doing down here? So I'm not going to try to avoid the trade that much. And bishop takes b3 maybe had to be played. And in this position, you're not doing that well. You've still got the airy king position, but at least you can continue fighting with a move like rook c8, for example. Just cover that back rank, but believe me, this is not comfortable. And Kirilla probably, not that he went for queen b3 because he thought he was lost here, but he saw queen b3 as a way to at least grab a pawn and had just overlooked this line, and unfortunately now it's just completely lost. But that being said, I think Kadrich is still a huge favorite to have won this position if they had gotten it.
Maybe we can get a closer look at the actual players in the hall with this game, Kadrich versus Kirilla. Yeah, that's just despair right there.
Yeah, no, unfortunately there's nothing to do. Rook takes c2 played. And not confidently, Ben, not confidently. Rook takes c2, and this is where you throw a few checks, but I think it's pretty clear, and he knows it there, as you can see by the look on his face, that there's no perpetual here. There's no perpetual, and Kadrich is just going to have to spend a little bit of time figuring out exactly where to put that king and, you know, block the right check. And once he figures that out, I think we will see Kirilla throw in the towel. He had to sack an entire rook there to even keep playing a few more moves because mate was unstoppable. So
it's hard for him to even look at the board anymore. He's just kind of like, I'm at your mercy, but
no,
I'm not ready to resign.
Exactly.
You know?
I don't want to look at it either. It's just like watching your soldier go down.
Yeah.
No, this is That's a tough miss, Queen H6. But I'll be honest, I actually missed it when we switched to the game as well. So I would also lose in the same way, I think.
It's one of those things. I saw the big meter turn goes to white, and I was trying to figure out why. And it's really kind of a pretty combination there.
Yeah.
What we're looking at the for Dennis Kadrich. While we were talking about this, we had a result in Group A. Liam Lee and Ray Robson did end up drawing their game. That was
Right.
to be expected. And so now there's only one game left in the A field, Hansen versus Nizhnik, and we have 2 games left in the B field.
Right. Yeah. With that draw, it looks like Hansen's game, which, by the way, he did make some progress in that game. So at least he's still fighting. Is Eric Hansen in the A group? He's the last game still ongoing in that group. In the B group, I think we also have the game of Ehrenberg and Steingrimson to look at, because that one really does feel like it's going to end really soon.
Yeah, let's look at that.
So we have this move Rook E3, and I mean, I just feel like checkmate's around the corner here, Ben. We can show how we got here, and it was that move Knight G5 that was played, and it seems almost crazy to play this move. G takes H3 as it opens up the queen exactly as we had indicated. Queen H5 and all sorts of moves here. This is just where you draw a bunch of arrows and you know that one of those variations is going to win. There are so many moves to consider here, and at the end of everything, we've always got that A pawn. So really good position for Ehrenberg, but he is tanking on time trying to solve it. So this is the only way that Steingrimson can come back in this game, is having one of those positions where it looks like mate, it's almost mate, but is it mate? Knight E7 was played with the idea, I'm going to put that knight on G6, and I mean, I get the feeling it's just over, but you have to find it, right? You have to prove it. There's going to be a rook G3, and then there's going to be a knight sack, is what it looks like. This knight can almost give itself up anywhere, let's say here, here.
Just to let the bishop in, huh?
Right, just to let that bishop hit the knight, and let's say the queen takes. Trying to determine what the best way to capture this is, but probably with the bishop is good enough. And he's thinking about moves like rook h8 here. He's thinking about all the crazy moves, because if you take, you are just checkmated. And he also has to decide, does he even take this knight? Maybe there's other moves in this position, like rook g8 or king f8. So, yeah, Ehrenberg is tanking on the clock, but this might be a good game to stay with just for the next couple moves, as there's 3 more moves until time control, and it seems like this is all or nothing for Ehrenberg. He's using all his time.
Yeah, actually, I'm looking at the time control situations. Okay, yeah, both of the B games have not made time control, so yeah,
Right.
might as well stick here.
Yeah, no, Kirilla is going to lose that position, and then it looks like the...
Do you think that game will end before this one? Probably, yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. But honestly, the only reason it might not is because Kadrich has got to figure out exactly where to put his king, and he's winning, so there's no point in rushing. So honestly, in his position, I would take my time, make sure to put that king in the right square, whereas this one, we could actually see a checkmate in the next couple moves. It depends if he's sort of figured things out. So let's take a look. It was rook g3 check, as you can see on the board there.
Do you have to play? Yeah, you kind of have to play knight g6, right?
Yeah, you have to play knight g6, and he's played it pretty quickly, and he's just put the pressure back on Sergei, right? It's just when you have the position that Steingrimson has, you just say, show me the mate, because there's not much you can do, so may as well play as fast as you can. He's already looking over at that score sheet, getting a little nervous with 2 moves to play before time control. The nice thing is it's only 2 moves. The bad part is that one of those moves probably has to be a knight sack, right? Because you're in that moment where the best move is probably giving away that knight somewhere, and going for something takes on g6. Yes, and he's played knight takes f6. This was the other way to sacrifice a piece. Knight takes f6, and I'm pretty sure that he's going to capture this. Yep. And I believe that the move he's going to play here is queen to g5, if I'm not mistaken. I think what he wanted to go for was queen g5, king g7, and then bishop takes. And I think that's what he wants to play, because this, you're not even down a piece in this line, because you know if he takes it, that's forced mate in 2. And if he plays anything else, you can reassure yourself, okay, I'm up, I'm not down material, right? So you're not worried that, oh, I miscalculated, or I might be losing at the end of this. So this is a nice clean variation that I think Ehrenberg is going to have to play that one last move before time control, as we are on move 40, and he has just played queen g5 check. I think that's a very good move. He's hit time control. He's got nothing to worry about, and I believe that this is I think this is sound. King g7, bishop takes g6, and I think white is completely winning. However, we've hit time control, so again, I don't think this game is going to finish right away as he gets up from the board, but Steingrimson is looking at a dead lost position, and either checkmate or massive material loss.
You think he'll give it a look over here, Steingrimson?
Oh, yeah. No question. You definitely check this one out because, for example, there's a move like king f8 in this position, right? And if I play king f8 here, you got to give real consideration to this because technically, you're not down material. If I even count the pawns, they're dead even. So, no, king f8 looks like the most reasonable move on the board unless it's completely losing to something. But this looks like a good calculation from Ehrenberg. White should be better here, although I have to say king f8 is quite a resilient move. Because if I take this, we can take back, and I don't see a checkmate. But what I think is that in a position like this, there will be a checkmate. It doesn't have to be right away, but with the placement of all the pieces, and don't forget this a-pawn, I mean, there's no question this is winning, but if I was black, I think king f8 is probably the best way to play on.
Can we glance back at Kadrich's game against Kirilla, see if Kirilla is still putting in those checks? It looks like it.
Yep, he's still putting in the checks. They're approaching move 40. The move rook b2 has just been played, and I believe Kirilla is sort of deciding here. The thing is, queen to d1 check, king a2, queen a4 is kind of a known perpetual idea, but we've got that queen, don't forget about it, on f8 that plans to come back to a3. So for example, something like this, if you check one more time, that's it for you, and this should be completely winning. And that's why Kirilla doesn't go for that check. Instead, he plays queen d3. So I think we'll see maybe king a1 is an idea. Okay, probably doesn't matter, but king a1 actually looks like the best move. If queen check here, I'm maybe not going to go up because of that. I'll play rook here. You're out of checks now. And if queen wants to go there, again, don't forget that queen from f8, still guarding that square. That's what you play when you're playing someone online. You play queen a3 check, they play king b1, and then you take their queen. You have to throw that last minute try in. But unfortunately,
especially if you have that auto move on. Yeah?
Yes, exactly. The over the board is not going to work. But the other thing is that after king a1, if queen d1, king a2, we actually transpose to queen d1 check. So they've hit move 40 here, but I don't actually imagine we're going to see Kirilla play on too much. Check. Queen a3 has been played. This is on the board. Queen takes e4, I believe he just played. And completely winning for white, but down a full rook is Kirilla. The reason you play on here is as soon as white wants to get that rook into the action, well, it's just not going to work because then there's checks you have to deal with. So probably has to be a little bit accurate here. Just make sure you find all those moves. Maybe rook b8 is the consideration. Block the next check with the queen and try to get your queen on the b2 square to threaten a mate and try to force an exchange of queens. But again, completely winning position. Kadrich will just take a little bit of time here and sort this one out. But unfortunately for Kirilla, making time control doesn't really help him out here.
Right. Well, we're waiting for moves to come in for the Group B games. In Group A, Eric Hansen is playing Ilya Nizhnik, and actually the chat on YouTube is talking about Eric Hansen.
Yep.
MJR League Infidel says, Hansen is always finishing last in these. But Nicholas Hansen sends him, I wonder if there's relation there, sets him straight. Hansen is 3.5 out of 6 before this round. That's pretty good. Remember, he's the last seeded person in the field.
Yep, he is the lowest rated seed coming into this tournament, and he's already upset Lequang, the #1 seed. So he's lost to Tari. You know what I mean? So you can beat and lose to anyone in this tournament. Tari is rated just 1 point higher than him at the bottom of the table in terms of the initial seeding, and Lequang's right at the top. So I think the players know that everyone's pretty strong in this field. And Hansen, by the way, made some serious strides in his game. First of all, he made time control, very big deal. Second of all, he traded off knight and bishop, another big deal, because you get to that rook endgame, you have better chances to draw. And I actually like what I just saw. The last move there looked like g4 was played, You get that king up to
And
g3.
Hansen Mijnik. Let's take a look at that. Let's get that board up there.
King up to g3, and I mean he's doing pretty well here. I think there's very, very good chances to actually hold this position. You get that king there. You always have maybe like a d5 check to chase the king back, and that pawn on f3 is probably going to fall. You also have rook down here and check there and take that pawn. So still a bit tricky. Obviously black is slightly better, but now that we're in a rook endgame and things have really been liquidated, I was speaking about that for like the whole broadcast, is that white just has to liquidate the queenside pawns, and he did exactly that. He traded the A pawn and the B pawn, and I think that was the key to better drawing chances. So I think he's comfortable. I think he's comfortable here.
All right. Let's go back to Group B and keep an eye on Kadrich against Kirilla. Rook just moved to f2, putting pressure on that f7 pawn.
Right. The move was rook f2. He's got the checks covered right here, and checks from this diagonal. He's going to parry with the queen. So that's the idea. King to g8 has just been played, and now Kadrich has to find probably a few accurate moves, but he's more than capable of that. The question is more just preference, how you want to do it here. Queen b3 looks reasonable. Hit that pawn. The queen is going to go back to e7. Yeah, he plays queen b3. And I think black has got to play queen e7 here.
That's on the board.
Queen e7, yeah. Yeah, and after queen e7, again, now you've sort of chased the queen back. You've covered the important checking diagonals and ranks, so the king is actually safe here. And now you need this rook to do something else. Now the rook needs to be rerouted. So if the rook can ever get down there for a check, and then you sort the queen out, it's that h8 square that's going to be where all the checkmate action takes place. So I think he's going to try to get that rook in behind in the position here, and that should lead to a checkmate. Or a resignation, more likely.
Are you surprised that Kirilla is playing on?
No, I'm not surprised because white doesn't have any pawns that can move. Mm-hmm. So he's actually just going to sit here and say, well, I have the idea if you ever bring your rook down to do this stuff, your king is exposed, and I'm going to check you. And you only have one queen, so you shouldn't be able to block everything. At least that's black's thought process. That's why you keep playing here. I don't think this is disrespectful or anything like that. I would actually probably play it on too, because for black's perspective, you're saying that if you bring all your pieces in, maybe I check you, and if you don't, you can't break through, right? Like at some point you have to bring the rook down, because this is the only weak point. You defend it twice, what else can white do? He's got to bring the rook in. He doesn't have any pawns, no bayonets, nothing, so it's you just force him to find a few moves, and as soon as Kirilla sees that there's no checks or that he's getting the rook in, believe me, he's going to resign on the spot, but you may as well make him show it.
Dennis played queen c4. Is this a waiting move?
Queen to c4. Right, queen c4. Well, I mean, he was also threatening with the queen there, maybe to just play rook here and gain time hitting the queen on maybe your way to the e8 square. So he has this small idea, but also it's the queen is sort of centralizing herself, getting a little closer to the center, watching a lot of important squares like a4, giving the king some breathing room. So he's just repositioning before the final strike here. Queen d7. Kirilla doesn't have to think about too much. It's just whether or not Dennis finds the continuing moves.
Well, for my sake, I hope that one of these games ends soon so we can talk to one of the players.
It would be nice. It looks like as we actually haven't had Kadrich on the show.
Right.
It would be interesting to get him down here.
And, Kirilla, to our longtime viewers, is no stranger to these kinds of broadcasts, usually sitting in this room or in the other one, and he might just be working, I'm not really sure, he might be working the U.S. Championship coming up in just 12 days.
Yes.
Chess Christmas is here, 12 days away. On Wednesday, March 20th, the U.S. Championship kicks off. It's a 12-player round robin. There's also going to have the U.S. women's field as well for the women's championship, and we know that Sam Shanklin's going to be there defending his U.S. title against the strongest national championship in the entire world. We've been talking about Wesley So, Fabiano Caruana, the recent World Championship challenger Hikaru Nakamura, and
Other way
now
around.
Leonard Dominguez.
Well, a FIDE challenge, not Hikaru.
Did I switch the order?
Maybe you were talking about the prestigious Chess 960 World Championship.
No, I'll take the heat. I'll take the heat right there if I was wrong about that. I mean, I went to London. I saw him. I know that it was Fabian.
Hikaru has been streaming a lot more.
Yeah.
No time for such things.
You know, Hikaru is world number 2 in the universal rating system.
Yes.
So he's got that going for
The
him.
URS.
Yes. Okay. So that's going to be at uschesschamps.com, just like this is. So there, I got my plug in.
Oh, absolutely. No, but people need to know, like, if you want to visit St. Louis, like,
Yeah.
this is the absolute time to do it. I think Nazi Paikidze is not defending her title.
I'm not sure why, but she is not in the field this year for the U.S. women's.
But Sam is
Yes.
going to be there, and I think people are going to be really excited just to see what Sam can do in terms of like a repeat performance, because that was a breakout performance. Probably people maintain the same skepticism, like, oh, he can't do it again, but it's what people thought the first time. So wonder how he's going to play, even sort of walking in as not overlooked anymore. People know that Sam is a big deal. Since he won the U.S. Title as well, he's gained a ton of rating, and he's been winning classical tournaments. So the guy is real scary right now. He's on a career high.
Yeah, he's breaking through to the elite.
Yeah.
You know. So let's take a look at our comments here. Joshua Postuma says the universal rating system is almost as legitimate as chess cube ratings. Hey now, buddy, you better mean that chess cube ratings are really legit.
Right. Yeah.
Get
But both
you.
are equally valid.
Yeah. But actually, there's a big discrepancy because Nakamura is a really big blitz player.
Right.
He's really great, but as far as classical, he's dropping his FIDE classical. He's number 16 in the world.
That's right. Yeah, he is falling out of let's say the top 10, which is big news for Naka. Like, that doesn't happen. You almost think of Naka as just a permanent top 10 resident, but that's not the case nowadays. As he still maintains his incredible form in blitz and rapid over the board and online, but I think he will be playing a lot more blitz and rapid tournaments this year, including the Grand Chess Tour and stuff like that. So, Hikaru is he's got to make that resurgence. Are we going to see him into the top 10 again, or are we going to see him maybe out of even the top 20? Like, players around him are gaining. I mean, there's some scary people in the top 50 in the world right now, but I think we all know that once you're in that 2750 club, the rating can go up and down, and it really does fluctuate a lot. And just because you see Hikaru out of the top 10, it's not like his career is at an all-time low. I think he can easily bounce back, and maybe the U.S. Championship is a perfect way to do that with a big performance.
Yeah, and it really is. I'm glad you brought up the Grand Chess Tour because it starts in May and it goes until December. There's more events now than ever before. Like, this is a really crowded calendar. And Hikaru, I'm interested to see if he can defend his Grand Chess Tour championship. You have to win the knockout, the Final Four in London at the end of the year as well. And he really proved that he belonged. And he is the defending Grand Chess Tour champion. Okay, so how about Ehrenberg Steingrimson? Has there been made any progress by Ehrenberg?
No. Well, it's his move. Steingrimson played the move that I recommended, King F8. I think that it wasn't very difficult to recommend it. It's just the only move. King F8 simply had to be played, and I wouldn't count out Black in this position yet. I think this is actually reasonably tricky. Like, for a position that I would consider totally winning for White, and I still do consider it that way, this is probably one of the trickiest, because the material is actually dead even, and you've actually got a bishop that's hanging, right? I could take that next turn. So, in some ways, this is like one of the weirdest completely winning positions I've ever seen, because it should be just over, it feels like, for White, but King F8 is surprisingly resilient, and at the very least, it's going to force Ehrenberg here to make some maybe accurate moves. Like, sometimes when you're completely winning, you don't need to be accurate. There's many winning lines you can pick and choose. Here it looks like I'm actually surprised at maybe how much patience is required to play White here. I didn't realize it would be this tricky, but King F8 I think is very resilient, and Steingrimson probably looks at this position and doesn't think he's out of it yet. I don't think he's lost hope. a few accurate moves, you might throw in the towel, say, oh, okay, this is why. But he's got to find them here, and they're not immediately obvious to me.
Well, I hate asking for inaccurate play, but is there a situation here where you could feasibly see Ehrenberg slipping up and losing the victory?
Yes, I mean, there's lots of ways to slip up here. First of all, you've got this bishop hanging. Black's going to take here. If there's ever a check, then the king seems to run to e7. So it's not that I see a particular continuation that may achieve that, but I just think that if white doesn't play very accurately, black's position is very, very obvious, that if you get checked, you move. If not, maybe I try to take this pawn. Maybe I just take on g2. Maybe black is just completely lost in all these lines, but I don't see the immediate kill here, and it's kind of like this has to be something. A bishop move here, a queen here, and a rook there. That's a checkmate. But we have to achieve that, and he sort of has to arrange the pieces correctly. Bishop h7 in order to play queen here and threaten rook down there. Maybe I have like queen d8. So I think he just has to play like one or two very good moves. And okay, in this position, for example, this is like totally winning, right? Because you're just taking pawns. The king is right in the middle of the board. There's no worries there, but I think you really feel like you're in with a fighting chance, considering earlier there was like it looked like almost forced mate on the board, and he survived to here. So I think that maybe bishop h7 is actually that very accurate move we're looking for in this position, but that's not immediately obvious to me. So I think Ehrenberg is really double checking things here, and he knows that this is not just completely over, even though maybe the evaluation certainly suggests it, I'm sure.
Okay, and Dennis Kadrich and Christian Carrillo looks a little bit different. I think the same result, though, is happening.
Okay, so Kadrich put his rook on f4, guarding the pawn. So basically here everything's protected, right? He's achieved a position where everything's protected, and then what he decided to do was, once he did that, he said, okay, time to take this pawn, get that off the board. I'm not sure if this is like the best or worst, who knows, but his idea, and again, this is an example of position which is totally winning, but you don't need to be accurate. You're up a rook, right? There's probably like ways the computer is saying, oh no, you have to go here, but I mean, you're up a rook. Many ways to win this position. I like his simple approach, which is, hey, I'm going to go take this. Everything's protected, and you can't protect this pawn forever. So I'm going to take it, and then I have the idea to run my king over here, where it's much safer, and it actually does have some pawn cover. And then from there, I should be able to achieve a position where I get my rook down there. At least that's probably his thought process. So I think what we see is exactly that on the board as we bring up the current position. And that king has gone for a stroll. Went on a journey, took the scenic route, and king e4 has just been played, queen e7, probably king f3. Once you tuck that king in there or over here, then I think we'll see him get that rook into the action. So once we see that, I think the sort of winning idea is going to be a lot more apparent. But yeah, this is the current position. He took that pawn off the board and just needs to get that rook down to the last rank. But again, I think it's very fair to play this on as black because there's always going to be checks to consider. So this completely winning, definitely not tricky, but you know, can't be played instantly. It's not one of those trivial wins. You do have to think, how do I get my rook down there and not give up a perpetual check?
Right. Well, it looks like we are not going to be able to talk to any of these players, unfortunately, at this juncture. But let's look at Eric Hansen's game for the last time in Group A. The last game in Group A, Hansen-Nizhnik.
This was the position last time. And we saw king e4, and I was saying definitely expect king g3, and that's what we've got. d5, rook a4, rook f6. I wouldn't be surprised to see the rook just shuffle here. I wonder what Eric is thinking about. Maybe he suspects there may even be another way to draw. I shouldn't say another way to draw as if this is some sort of forced draw or anything. I think Ilya is still pushing here because if you lose this pawn and then black takes this pawn, it's not over. A king and pawn endgame is losing there. A rook endgame can be tricky, especially with this pass pawn. So I don't think this is trivial at all, but again, I think Eric has made considerable strides since the presence of bishop and knight on the board and stuff like that. So I think Eric would be happy with this. Rook b4 seems to be the main candidate move in this position, as the last two moves seem to be waiting moves. Rook a4, rook f6. So rook b4 seems logical. I just wonder what Ilya is planning. He may be planning something like rook here. I'm not sure. Rook here, trying to say you can't just wait forever. And then if the rook goes down, then we may have some weird position where everyone's taking pawns, but it's hard to say for the moment. The other thing you might want to do is play h6, and that actually looks more and more likely that he wanted to bring his rook here so that there wouldn't be a move like rook b6 hitting those two pawns. So maybe he wants to play h6, push the pawn up the board, maybe exchange a bit, and try to take this pawn on d4 and trade it for the pawn on f3. So still some chances for Nizhnik in this endgame, and Eric's also getting a little low on time, right? Nizhnik is able to play pretty quickly in this endgame because he's got nothing to lose. He's the one playing for the win, and the more I look at this, I have to say I do probably expect a draw, but it's kind of hard for me to say because some of these rook endgames, it's just not in a book, right? It's just you have that feeling a lot of them are drawn. For example, he's just played the move h5, and I get the feeling this is more and more drawish, but he has some ideas. For example, takes. What does he want to do if he could? Would be to put this rook here where it actually defends every single pawn. Kind of weird. But maybe this is an idea, or at least it's the idea he's going for. And if white plays g5, then there's two things. There's the rook being on this file, and then there's the rook being on this rank here. So maybe rook e6 and try to stay protecting this pawn. White has sometimes an idea like rook here and rook there, but yeah, the more I look at this, I do think that it's probably drawn, but not an easy one. Eric will definitely have to work here, and as I mentioned, his clock is getting a little bit low, so long term he has to make sure that he doesn't get low on time again, because then there's no more time.
Right. Yeah, they've
Doesn't
already
get
hit
30
that.
extra minutes.
Already hit that 40th move. We're going to wrap up the show here from St. Louis, but let's take a look at our standings so far in Group A. It's looking to be a repeat of 2 days ago, all draws, with Jeffrey Zhang still at the top. What do you think Zhang's chances are of staying in this position over the next few days?
Well, obviously he's got the best chances personally because he's, you want to be situated right at that top position going into those final days in any tournament. But the thing about this tournament is it's not a Swiss, so it's not like being in the top position. You play the guy in second place. It's not the case. You may play the guy in last place. In fact, I think you may still have to play Rustem. So it's not so much about that. The pairing system is already determined. So he knows who he has to play, and it's going to be no easy games from here on out. Hansen and Nizhnik, if they draw, will both join at 4 points in second place, and you can just see how tight the tournament is. The tied for fourth position right now goes all the way down into the bottom half of this table, and you could have basically 1 point separating first place and like sixth place. So this is a very tight tournament. Players are going to be drawing a lot in when you have these high ratings going head to head, and that 1 point gap is not completely safe. And I think at this point, honestly, nearly anyone with 3.5 points could still win the tournament.
Yeah, and the final day on Sunday could be really exciting when it comes to the playoff system, because we will have a playoff if there is a tie for first place.
Right.
Let's look at our standings in Group B. And I understand, actually, these are assuming, there you see some asterisks there, assuming the results we think will happen. Bai Jinshi still with the lead, and he has played all of his closest competition already. Barish Pulitz, Sorokin, Mista, Kaidanov. Has he played Kadrich? I think he has. And Theodoro, yes. So in theory, smooth sailing for Bai Jinshi in the last 2 days.
Right, but he's going to be playing some unpredictable players, right? What I was mentioning about Ehrenberg and Kirilla is these guys play some really fun attacking chess, and who knows if that's like the weakness that we haven't seen yet, if that might expose something. It'd be a different game, I think. We also mentioned what happens when guys aren't fighting for first place. Well, he's got to play 3 guys that are going to try to play spoiler Ben, so we'll see how that goes for him. But yes, you're also playing people who aren't doing as well, aren't as in form in this tournament, so you do naturally feel like he should have better chances there. But, things sort of unchanged at the top of the table here in Group B. A lot of draws. Bai Jinshi maintains his lead. It's definitely a more secure lead than the one that Jeffrey has in the A group, as there's a little bit more gap between the players there, but I think it's still reasonable to assume that with a win, if Kadrich pulls this off as he should, jumps up to 3.5, he can still score some big results with 3 games to play, and all these players are going to be fighting for some prize money, and the guys near the top are going to look to catch Bai Jinshi.
All right. And we hope that you're here to join us over the next 2 days. This weekend, we're going to wrap up the 3rd annual Spring Chess Classic. And tomorrow, actually, we're going to have a special guest host. We're not replacing you. We're just replacing me. Don't worry. It's actually, you probably really enjoy it because it's Caleb Denby, where he's going to bring a little bit of Road to 2000 to the Spring Chess Classic. He'll be hosting our penultimate round, 8, tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. Central Time. And remember, the games kick off at 1 p.m. Central Time at uschesschamps.com, so you can be with us the whole time if you want to. Thanks for joining us in the chat today. We had a really good time. Our streamer was Tammy Hyde, and the world's greatest production B team, of course, as always, Danny Machuca was your technical director, Isaac Schrantz, graphics and audio. My name is Ben Simon. He is Grandmaster Aman Hambleton. Aman, it's going to be a fun weekend.
Oh, it sure will. I can't wait to see, with all these players tied near the top of the table, what's going to happen and really who wins these tournaments.
And until tomorrow, we say so long from the Show Me State. This has been a presentation of the St. Louis Chess Club.